Computer activated. Begin playback. Entry title, Mondas Breakaway.
Mondas, the jewel of the solar system. Sharing orbit with the planet Earth, the population was thriving while the Mondasian reptiles slept beneath the surface of that still developing world. Art, culture, science, technology, all hallmarks of the great Mondasian race. But on one dark, awful day, all that would come to an end. The mining city of Scraden, the largest fuel production facility on the planet, was slowing down its process for today. There was an excitement in the air. Miners were emerging from their pits with huge smiles, embracing their families. Everyone on Mondas knew that today was going to be the day everything would change, and for one stranger among them, it would bring great tragedy. The Time Lord striding through the villages surrounding the main shaft of the mine stood out for two reasons. His cavalier fashion was at odds with the soot-covered workforce and their overall clad families. But while the people of Mondas rejoiced, the other's expression was intense. Here stood a Time Lord locked in his own mind. Kept safely in a metal case connected to his arm, a timonic fusion device was primed and ready. His orders were simple. Find a suitable detonation point, and activate the device. In one simple push of a button, the grandeur and legacy of Mondas would be snuffed out in an instant, and only rocks and dust would remain. The other knew what was at stake if he failed, but as he looked around, with the joyful laughter and song filling the air, he could feel his heart breaking. Whatever the price of failure was, it couldn't be worse than this. He felt a tugging sensation as a pair of hands latched onto the sleeve of his ornate jacket. It was a little girl, no older than 10, her face caked in soot. "Excuse me, sir, are you lost?" she asked innocently. The other froze, his eyes closing tight. It was foolish to assume he could avoid communication with the natives. He met the girl eye to eye. There was something not right about this girl. Her right iris seemed to rotate like a cog. "Sir?" the little girl asked. "No," he began, attempting to mask his emotions. "I am not lost." The little girl's head tilted slightly. "You look like one of the noble elite. Why are you so far from the capital?" The other's grip on the metal case tightened. It was bad enough that he was on a strict deadline, but this as well? If Mondas wasn't in the correct orbital position... But he needed to focus on moving the girl along. Her eye was troubling the other. "I have a task that needs to be performed. A task of great importance to the people of Mondas." The girl became excited, practically bouncing on the spot. "Is it about the conversion?" "Conversion?" "Yes," the little girl nodded. "We've been chosen as the first village to trial cybernetic conversion. People talk to me in school now that I have this." She pointed to her artificial eye. "Mother says I was born half blind, so they took out my broken eye and now I can see again." So, the Mondasian race had become this advanced, and at such a fast rate too. That is good," the other replied. The girl looked at the other's hands. Come on and see Daddy." The Time Lord soon found himself being dragged along the cobbled streets by this child. "What happened to your father?" "There was a cave-in. Daddy got trapped in the main shaft. The doctor man said that he wouldn't survive, but he's okay now. They made him better." Better. Artificial eyes was one thing, but surely not. "Mummy, we're back!" the girl called. They stood before a rudimentary dwelling. A shack. A woman appeared at the entrance, her jet-black hair tied into a messy bun, her eyes hooded and bloodshot. The apron she wore over her front was caked in a tar-like substance. Blood had stained her overalls. "Jaya, you came back just in time." Their mother's smile remained strong, though it was clear she was exhausted. "And who's this fine gentleman with you?" The other remained silent while the child introduced him. "He's a noble, I think. He says he has an important thing to do, but he likes my eye, so I wanted to show him Daddy." Jaya's mother chuckled. "Well, you're in luck. He's very responsive today. Come in, sir." As the mother vanished into the gloomy dwellings, Jaya followed with a bounce. The other sighed. It would be so easy to just walk away now. But curiosity killed the Time Lord after all. As he crossed the threshold, he was hit with a stench that made him dry heave. The house stank of rotting flesh. "Daddy, Daddy, we're home!" Jaya called as she ran to the corner of the shack. The other was struggling to see in the darkness, although he could see a shape in the shadows. It towered over Jaya and was hunched over. What he could see clearly was the hand. The flesh was practically rotting off the bone, blood trickling from his sleeve. When it spoke, the other felt a chill in his bones. The shrill, high-pitched mechanical tones were not organic.
Jaya,
the thing replied. Jaya's mother stood beside the other. He thought he was going to die. Every bone in his body was broken, making damage to his heart and lungs. If it wasn't for conversion, he wouldn't be here. By rights, he should be dead. But there he was, still alive, technically. But what kind of life could this be?
Jaya,
the cybernetic being began, its head tilted towards the other. Its face was covered in medical gauze. Patches of blood ran across the fabric, while yellow eyes peered out from two large holes.
Who is this?
The mother gave the other a playful nudge. A noble who's decided to muck it in with us common folks. See, Jaya? I told you the elite were kind to us. Yes, the other muttered. What kindness was this? This man was saved from death, but in return his body was ripped apart, decimated and defiled by plastic and metal. Whatever Mondasian remained was being kept alive by the hefty steel unit wired into his chest. It was so heavy, and with the apparatus on his head, it was weighing the poor man down. Jaya took her father's hands, which squelched as her fingers made indentations in the putrid skin. "Did you hear, Daddy? The Supreme Leader says one day we can make the conversion available to everyone who wants it. When I get older, I can be just like you, Daddy." The figure opened its mouth. The words that escaped from it nearly caused the other to vomit.
Yes, you will become like me.
That was it. The final nail in the coffin. If there were any doubts in the other's mind, that exchange silenced them all. He turned on his heels. "I have to go." "Oh, how come?" Jaya asked. The cybernetic being turned its head as far as it would go.
Yes, why?
The other took a lungful of air. He felt sick to his stomach. Destroying the planet would be a mercy killing. He turned to the family. "I have prior appointments to make." He couldn't hide a slight voice break. "But you won't miss the Supreme Leader's speech, will you?" Jaya asked.
Glory to Mondas, glory to Mondas, glory to Mondas.
The other had had enough. As he began to march away from the house, he felt something nudge against his boots. What? It was a small, vaguely insectoid device, with two eyes staring up at him. What is that? Jaya's mother walked towards him, noticing the insectoid. "Oh, you've met Senard." "Senard?" the other asked. He was dreading the answer. The mother caressed the device as if tending to a pet. Her neighbours suffered so much. Senard, their son, developed Miner's disease. His lungs were sliced to pieces. He was only 3 months old. But look, they saved him. She held the creature, who beeped happily. Do you think this is a good quality of life, madam? He asked. Outrage wasn't the tone. It was more a sense of emotional exhaustion. The mother's smile never seemed to fade. Yes, of course. Life is so precious. If it can be saved by any means, then it must sustain. It is as the Supreme Leader says, we will survive. The other knew when he was beaten. This was a society on the warpath to a deeply unpleasant, dangerous future. Well, I wish you good fortune in the days to come. And to you, the mother replied. The last thing the other saw of her was the lady playfully placing the former child against her face, humming. The beeps from the cybermat came in time with the tune. Now, the other was nearly running. He had spent too long on distractions. He was now reaching the point of no return. He had to get to the mine shaft. The fusion device would rip across the planet if ignited underground. It wasn't long before the other had broken the lock and stood by the entrance to the shaft. This was it. Placing the case on the ground, he removed the explosive device and primed the detonator. He placed both hands on the fusion bomb and held it over the shaft. But in that moment, his mind began to wander about the child. She wasn't the only innocent child on Mondas. Guilt was starting to set in. The division was clear on this. If Mondas remained, humanity would not thrive. But then, who was to say that Mondas needed to be destroyed? He swiftly adjusted the controls and held his breath. With his eyes closed, he let go of the explosive, and with that, the fate of Mondas was sealed. Jaya and her mother had assembled with a crowd of fellow miners and their families. Men on horseback waved their caps as everybody cheered. Above them, the holographic screen depicted the Mondasian capital, an opulent palace surrounded by millions of onlookers. The cheers reached ear-piercing volumes as a mechanical voice boomed over the speakers.
Citizens of Mondas, your Supreme Leader approaches.
On the balcony of the palace, the leader strode with confidence as he addressed the crowd. A middle-aged man, he looked resplendent in his silver and black uniform. Atop his head, an ornate helmet complete with black handlebars.
My children of Mondas, today I do not address you as your leader. I address you as your equal. For today, race, sex, and social standing are all meaningless. We are on the cusp of a new dawn for Mondas, where we are all equal.
The crowd erupted once again. Isn't this exciting, Mummy? Jaya asked. It is. At last. The leader continued.
Many millions of years ago, the surface of this planet was teeming with reptiles. As is the way of all life, it evolved. It is now time for us to do the same. With the breakthroughs in cybernetics by Dr. Men Allen and her teams, we have in our clutches the very means by which we can evolve through...
He paused. The assembled crowds began to murmur. The ground below them began to vibrate in an unnatural way. Jaya turned to her mother. What's happening? The leader angrily shot a look back into his palace.
Report!
The same mechanical voice chimed out.
Seismic disturbance detected.
Before the leader could continue, the screen cut off. There were panicked screams erupting from the crowds as the vibrations grew and grew, till the buildings around them began to shake violently. Rubble from the taller structures came crushing down onto them. Several onlookers were crushed, others injured as the debris continued to fall. Jaya clutched her mother close to her. What's happening, Mummy? She cried. Stay close, love. The air seemed to drain from the world for 1 second. One single, solitary second. And there was nothing but silence. Then the air was filled with the sound of an almighty explosion. The air turned hot and a sudden motion knocked the breath out of Jaya. Her mother looked up at the sky, her face twisting in horror. Jaya, look at the sky. The Mondasian child stared up at the oh-so-familiar sky, and her eyes began to fill with tears. They were moving. Mondas was moving. As the primitive shack collapsed around him, Claire's father raised its head.
We will survive.
Record end.
This is Cyber Leader J. Conversion Theatre 7 Alpha is operational. Prepare Batch 542 for full conversion.